Hi guys, Alicia with Working Dog Radio, Torchlight Canine, and Oil Capital Canine Fund. Thank you guys for tuning in to another awesome episode. Please check us out on YouTube. It's a new format for us. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. We're going to start doing some training videos and some other cool stuff on there. So we would really appreciate your follow on there. We'd like to take a second to thank our amazing sponsors. Without them, none of this would be possible. So guys, please check out Kinetic Dog Food, 513-615-6904. They are amazing. American Aluminum Accessories. They make all things canine insert. They've got some new heat alarms. Please check them out. Give them a call at 800-277-0869. Horizon Structures. Everything mild to wild in a dog kennel. They have it. They will drop it off at your door. Give them a call at 888-447-4337. If you guys haven't checked out Highland Canine Training yet, what are you waiting for? Jason and Aaron are amazing. They've got all kinds of courses, classes, and schools going on. Please check out Highland Canine Training at Tactical Police, the letter K, the number 9, training.com. Ray Allen Manufacturing, right there in Colorado. Everything is sewn there. They are amazing. They do so many collaborations with so many of the actual working canine guys in our industry, including me. Give them a shout. Check them out at rayallen.com and use the discount code WDR10RAY for 10% all things Ray Allen. Dogtra.com. If you have an e-collar, if you use an e-collar, if you have a working dog or a pet dog, check out Dogtra. They've got all of the products that you need. You can go to dogtra.com and use discount code WDR10 for 10% off a single item over $200. Enjoy the episode. We'll be back. Thanks.
All right, everybody, Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite. We're back for another great episode series, the episode number 2 in our series of people you might not know, but probably should. Ted and I are finding folks that we've met, different random places, different training things, and that are probably well known in their local area or even little parts of the country, but more people need to know these folks. So, as always, I'm Eric Stanbro from Ohio, Ted Summers from Oklahoma. Ted, what is going on over in Tulsa?
I just finished my last handler school of the year. I did over 100 handler schools this year, and I can feel it. So I am glad that we're done with this one. I only had two in this class, so I was super stoked. And it's 2 single-purpose dogs, and they were rocking it. So they got about 1 million reps, I think,
I would think,
160 hours. So one's going to the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics in their airport interdiction guys, and the other one is going to a small sheriff's department out in western Oklahoma. So Esky, little Malinois, and the other one's a golden retriever, shockingly, and she's a rock star. If you've never seen a good working golden retriever, man, she's a hammer. Her name's Maggie. But I'm done. I got a bunch of new dual purpose dogs coming in for my first handler school of next year, which will be probably February-ish. So, yeah, that should be any day. And Alicia gets back today from Europe for our project that we're working on over there. But other than that, I'm probably going to coast to the end of the year.
Oh, fuck, dude. It's the 13th. I mean,
I'll coast for the next 10 days, 12 days. So right. I'll go in and work pets and help out with doing that. But I'm probably not going to do any police dog stuff. So other than my normal training group, what are you doing?
I don't think I have any. There was a big group here today of canine guys and SWAT guys from the state doing some stuff, working on some things together. The fun house is always good for that type of stuff. Today's interesting. Today's the last day. One of my trainers, Leia, who works for me, has been with me for a few years. Today's her last day. Her last go home is in 55 minutes. Her last dog. She starts Monday at the academy for the Cleveland Police Department. Moving on to law enforcement. I'm really super happy for her. I think she thought maybe when she told me about it that I'd be like, oh man, it's bullshit. You can go ahead and bounce, but I'm not, I tried. Once I decided I wanted to be a cop, it took a long time for me to try to get it. And that's back when 5,000 and 6,000 people were testing for departments, and it took a while and it was tough. And I remember getting that call from Canton, and it just changed my life. So I happened to be with her when they called and left a voicemail that they were putting her in the academy, and I couldn't have been happier for her. And Cleveland's tough, man. It's a rough city.
Yeah.
One of the worst in the country. What'd she say? 7-month academy, I think they're going to be in. The cool thing about a place like Cleveland, though, is that there's a lot for you to do in your career. You don't have to just be on patrol. You can if you want, but detectives of all kinds and everything. And they have 2 service dogs that they got from us, actually, up there at Cleveland PD. So they're emotional support dogs for the cops. So a guy can just not handle calls and just come in and pet a dog for a while on there. But I guess they got one from us. We didn't do we just did the obedience training. The dogs were just really good. They just lay there. And so they liked it so much they got a second one. So I was like, cool, man, that's pretty sweet. So what do we got going on tonight?
Well, this guest, so for those listening, if you remember back in the day, Alicia and I owned a company called Working Dog Dry Goods. We've since sold it to our buddy Paige, who has done a great job with it and has carried on. And we sold some stuff to Ray Allen, and we did some projects for Ritland and some other stuff. And the painted muzzles is how the whole thing started. So this is a long time ago, our next guest, we actually met through that venue, and I met him in person the first time, like, I don't know. It's been like 8, 9 years ago. It's a while ago at one of the canine shows. We had an extra ticket, and I was like, yo, you want to go? And he was like, yeah, sure. So, Chris, his name's Chris Altherr. Chris, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
Thank
It was
you.
a terrible intro. I just know this guy. I met him in fucking Vegas, and let's have him on the show 8 years later, 9 or however many years later this is. So give us a little bit of your background, how you got into dogs, all that kind of stuff, what you got going on right now.
I won't go into crazy detail, but background is I've been 21 years in dogs, primarily pet dog training. I started by, I was in a lot of trouble. I think a lot of people were that way when they were younger. And so enough times getting arrested and whatnot, and I had to find something else to do. So it's about 21 years ago, I took one of my dogs to training and ended up doing an apprenticeship, and it just started from there.
Where'd you do an apprenticeship?
Local trainer here in town that used to train with Von Lick. So that trainer trained at Von Lick, and you know how things go. People separate and branch off and whatnot, and then they opened up their own facility, and that's kind of how that started.
Yeah, the first time we had Kenny on, he says that he thinks he's trained more canine trainers than he has actual dogs, which I believe.
I think he was actually pointing out people as they were walking by, like, yep, that one there, that one there, that one there.
Which is true. Which I can't blame him. I mean, I've had several people leave Torchlight and go off and start their own thing, which excellent. So, and now you're just north of Indy. You're in central Indiana now. So, what prompted this, like, aside from this whole, interviewing some guys that we kind of think, or some people that we think the industry needs to hear from, I've known that you were a talented trainer for a long time, and has always been kind of like, we've been friends on social media and whatever else, and I kind of keep up with you. I saw you at a trial in Gilroy, California, last summer?
Yeah.
2020? Yeah. Was that right? Was it last summer? You were trialing in the 3s in PSA, which is super hard. And I don't remember exactly what the scenarios were. The judge was cats. But I noticed a lot of stuff going on during this about, like, with the dog. And for those that are listening that aren't really familiar with PSA, it can be kind of chaotic at the upper levels, and we put a lot of priority on control. There's still precision involved, but not like IGP or IPO, whatever they're calling it these days. So the one thing that I did really notice with you and the dog was the precision. I was like, something's up here. And then I start seeing all these videos on social media, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? So you and I just kind of had like a back and forth, and then we had a conversation about this whole process that you're doing now. And you've had some things, and for those that are listening to this, I encourage you to go either look for him on social media or just go to his website and look at what's going on And the kind of what I want to talk about is this whole process you've got going with the e-collar work, and then how you're generalizing some of the behaviors, because you are going at about 100 miles an hour with like retrieves and marks and healing and center healing and down. It's faster than I can keep up. You're like plots, or just giving the dog 1,000 commands at a time, and it's fast, fast, fast. So the generalization is super high. And I just kind of want to talk about from a canine trainer side, the generalization of that for, especially for detection work, would be super valuable, because that's what we seek to do, right? Is to generalize the behavior in any environment, no matter what. So if I'm teaching a dog to find odor and I can generalize it that quick, I can do more dogs in less time. So I'm like, what's going on here? So just give me a little bit of background of like how you were introduced to an e-collar, and kind of like set us on the road to like modern day.
The lady that I told you about that I started with, that's the first place I went. And even though the person wasn't an e-collar trainer, they're kind of like the what I call old school yank crank helicopter a dog in a second type trainer. She ended up having a dog with me, and we trained. And you ever see a dog just lose his mind, like to the point where, this dog I'd have, he'd bust blood vessels in his nose and just bleed just from seeing a decoy, like the screaming, the intensity. It was always go, go, go. And that was the first time I ever experienced an e-collar. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the person who did this and helped me with this, they were the first person to tell me to never use an e-collar. So this is where things like this, I'm one of those people, like, I'll buy into whatever you tell me, all right, until it doesn't make sense, or until you can't demonstrate it, until you can't show me, or until it contradicts what you're telling me in the first place. So this is what stopped my process with that. We got a dog that's intense on a decoy. And so they're trying everything they can to just get a little bit of control around this dog. And so when the person comes to me, she says, I'm gonna put your dog on an e-collar. And so this conversation happens of, what do you mean we're gonna put them on an e-collar? I thought they're gonna ruin dogs. And she's like, well, this is a special case, and this isn't anything bad about this person whatsoever. It's just, there's actually a really good person, friend, family type deal. That's the relationship we developed. This is the same person. I go to their house, have dinner, hang out with them. But in this moment, it came down to a situation where what they had was not capable of fixing a problem that was created. So they went to an e-collar. All right. And then when we started working with my dog, the mindset in this was, put the dog on the decoy and then just blast the dog off the decoy, which you still see a lot of that happening today.
Yeah. What year was this when you did this? Like you're talking about?
21 years ago. So whatever.
That checks out.
I still kind of see it here, and people ask me, and, so it's sad to see, but, again, I was one of those people that, I got somebody in front of me and I trust them and believe them and I'm following them. And so I had no idea at the time what was actually taking place inside the dog's mind when this was going on. So it's very easy to figure out now, looking back. You got a dog fighting a decoy, you got a decoy fighting a dog, and then all of a sudden you got high intensity pain coming from a collar, and you get what now I know is false association, where the dog starts to perceive the collar as the decoy versus the handler because there's no prior conditioning. And that creates so much conflict and confusion and all that stuff. So that's not where I started with e-collar. That was just my first introduction ever, my first interaction with e-collar. That situation led on to more stuff and more trainers. And with this particular dog that I ended up even developing a type of guilt where I felt bad for what I had created and installed in this dog, to the point to where I just couldn't take this dog places. If somebody put on a coat, he'd just lose his freaking mind. You know what I mean? Or if somebody raised their voice, he'd lose his freaking mind. And so that actually shifted me, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. And it actually put me over into the complete opposite type of training, where it's just, build and shape behavior through motivation, no punishment, no correction, none of that stuff. There's a little bit of guilt in there for that. And that's why it wasn't necessarily the smartest decision, I don't think, but it was one of those situations where I'm just going to see what this does instead. Because you don't know till you know. I think everybody can kind of agree with that. Like, you got to dabble in something for a little bit. So after I went there, I realized that I wasn't doing anything. And then I jumped back and forth, because you got, there's all these categories. This is what I've learned. There's all these categories, and I don't, like I said, I don't want to get into a bunch of, this type. But where I came from with her was, make the dog do it, helicopter the dog if you have to, choke him out if you have to, whatever's got to happen. That's just the way it was done. Then you go over here and it's don't make them do anything, try to get them to want to do it through motivation and desire. And that wasn't really what I wanted to be at. And then I found myself in that avenue where people are like, well, we'll reward good behavior, but then we'll kick their butt if they do bad behavior. So it's kind of like it's still a guessing game. But basically what I found is that in my lifetime of switching from back and forth, it's like everybody had good points and everybody had weak points. It didn't matter what avenue I was in. So the people who made the dog do things, their dogs would listen, but they didn't really necessarily appeal to me because they didn't look happy doing it. And then the one dogs would look happy doing it, but it wasn't necessarily a reliable thing that you could see happening because it was whether they wanted to or not. So the point that I'm making is in every area that I went, I would find that people always had their restrictions based off of what they put themselves in, like what box they put themselves in. Like they blocked themselves because they would say, I'm never going to do this because of X, Y, and Z. And the same thing would happen from this side. So what I noticed is that when we go through this, we start dealing with callers, and I started dealing with callers I went to that company. I'm not going to name names of companies, but I went to a company where they referred to themselves as balance trainers, which a lot of people refer to themselves as balance trainers, and whether they are or not or whatever, I don't know. But my point is, it's you use a collar for this, and then you use rewards for this, or you use a correction for this, or you use it for this. And what I realized is that there was limitations that were put on the application of tools, which means that if you put this specific tool in this category, it limits your ability to use that tool for any other thing versus what it is that you labeled it. Is that making sense to you guys?
Oh yeah, 100%. And you still see, I mean, it's almost 2025 and there are still people that think that e-collars are for punishment only. And,
yes.
And they treat it that way. Right. And that's kind of the misconception. In the United States, I kind of blame, tasers because that's how, I mean, this is a terrible explanation but that's how it happens. I've watched professional trainers explain to pet clients, like, this is just like a taser. I'm like, having been tased multiple times, it is nothing like a taser. Yeah. This is a terrible example, but that's, and there's a ton of like baggage that comes along with that too, because when do we get tased? Well, if you're not me, you get tased if you're doing something you shouldn't be. Like if you're me, you just get tased randomly by your friends. But
Chris is like, I did all my shit before tasers. You got lucky.
So, but it's a terrible example. But I 100% agree. In fact, we had a pet client come in this week, and they still are referred to as shot collars. They still are referred to, like it says punishment, and that. I mean, it's almost 2025 and like that's got to kind of break away. But yeah, so I'm sorry, go ahead and can continue on there.
But yeah, so that's what I noticed is that everybody already had a pre-built mindset. And what I found out is that, like you talked about, they don't have to be used as a punishment. But what I found and what I'd always dig into is I'd start asking a series of questions to people and I'd say, okay, so you're comfortable with the collar. You're okay with the collar, you're fine with the collar. And they're like, totally. And I'm like, would you ever use a collar in this scenario? And the answer I'd get from the same person that would tell me that would be like, no. So even though like outward, they would tell me that they're comfortable with the collar, I still found that people had a lot of limitations or restrictions in the application of using a collar. Like an example would be like, I get a lot of crap for this. But one of the things I love doing is I love training puppies. And so that's what I do whenever I get a dog. I kind of put out videos of the dog as I'm going through the process. And the amount of people that frown upon me putting, a remote collar on a puppy that's like 10 weeks old is like, to me, I can tell from the public how they perceive that. And this is coming from people who say they're cool with collars. You know what I'm saying? So like that tells me itself that if they're okay with collars and they don't think that collars are a bad thing, they would not have a problem with putting a collar on a puppy at 10 weeks old. It just goes against what I'm saying. You see what I'm saying? Like in those areas.
Yeah. It's just like people have misconceptions about or misgivings about putting an e-collar on a small dog.
Totally.
Even I think it could be 3 years old. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Wow, it's just a little.
Or exactly. Or an old dog or like, and we've had Pat Nolan on a couple times and he'll put remote collars on young puppies. And I've watched him do it. Like I've seen him do it where like, at 6-8 months old, he's got dogs like doing directionals. Obviously it's puppy level stuff, but I mean, it's amazing to watch. And obviously the dogs look happy doing it, and they're little goofball labs. So, I mean, they're, good to go.
We have a 9-week-old puppy in the facility right now. The cutest, tiniest little thing, man. Everybody is in love with this puppy. The worst barker we've ever had. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dogs. The worst barker ever. And I don't like. What kind of dog? It's supposedly a bulldog doodle mix. I don't see either of those two in him. It's an awesome dog, like a fun dog, little tiny, good. We put coats on that little bitch today and took pictures, Santa coats and shit. So we're definitely going to whore that out. But we have a YS300 bark collar on the dog, and we had to take the strap out and put Velcro strap in there to fit her because she's so little. But guess what? She is shut up and stopped peeing in the crate, and is like coming out better, not manic, not crazed, not wild. And this is just, these people got the puppy and brought it right to us. So the puppy went from mom, litter, who knows what was going on there, or straight, I think she was living in a barn, straight to us. So I'm, and even my people, it was a little tough for them. They're like, yeah, I go, shut the dog up, and we tried other things. There's other tricks that I use with, an e-collar on top of the crate with vibrate function, and like in a metal dish and vibrate. And it usually works. It just didn't work for that dog. Then we're doing vibrate and kicking the crate with just a little bit. Sometimes that works too.
Tapping the crate, not.
Yeah. Just a little bit with my foot. And then, but it still doesn't work. But that YS300 bark collar worked. And now you go in there and she's quiet. And again, stopped her from peeing in the crate because she was just getting spun up. So like using the e-collar, but people will be like, I'm good with a 2-year-old German Shepherd with a bark collar and e-collar, but not a Yorkie and no 10-year-old, Greyhound or whatever. So it's interesting. That's a good point that you made there. So I had a couple questions. I want to go all the way back. The first time you took your pet dog to that training class, why did it hit you so hard? What made you be like, shit, this is cool, I want to do this?
Well, I think it's like I'm actually obsessive compulsive with a lot of things. I'm super addictive personality, which is how I got into trouble. I was getting arrested and doing drugs. I think the first time I got arrested, I was 12. And so I was one of those people that if I did something, I did it 110 mile an hour always. And that's kind of
no one likes a quitter.
Yeah,
exactly.
But it's just part of my personality. It's very hard for me to not do something and then I get obsessive with it. So even if I have a drink of water, like if I got a glass of water, I got to drink the whole thing. When I clean my car, I've got to clean the whole thing. Like I've always been that way. So when I took my dog to training, it was one of those things that if I do it, I do it. And so that's really what it was. And then once I did it, I just had fun making things happen. I mean, it is kind of cool to see that you have the ability to change the way something thinks or processes. You know what I'm saying? Like a reconditioned behaviors.
Help. You see results and you're like, shit, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that. So now kind of understanding your personality of the way you're talking about the way you will listen to this and that and then question it if it doesn't match up. What other parts of your life is that? Like, did you do any other career type stuff where you had to kind of do that same thing?
No, actually, I'm a high school dropout. I think the last grade I actually finished was eighth grade. I went part of my freshman year, quit going half the year, and then I actually remember my dad had to. It's actually how I met my wife. My parents had to call and get the school to let me come back for my what would have been sophomore year because I didn't go the last couple months.
Yeah,
and I think I went a couple of days, and I had seen my wife at school, and then it turned into me just showing up to the classes that I was in with her, and then I just leave and go party and all that other stuff. But that's as far as my education goes.
But if you think about it, if you would have, because just if you were in a different mental space, you probably would have crushed school. Being kind of an analytical thinker.
Could have been, but I always struggled. The part of it was I struggled with it big time because it's kind of like, I mean, you kind of see it now. They create a curriculum or they create a lesson and it fits everybody. And I always had trouble processing the way that certain people said I was supposed to process. Again, I would hyper focus on certain things. Like if somebody put an assignment in front of me, I'd read that thing 50 times and I'd think of it 50 different ways. And I end up stressing myself out to the point to where I wouldn't even want to be there. Like that was me 24/7.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. You can be a genius. And if you're in the, I don't want to, Like, I don't want to do this. I don't care what it is. You're just not going to do it, especially if that's your, kind of your personality. The funny thing is you got 8th grade at school. I graduated and I went to college. And if I wrote out something, I guarantee your handwriting's better. I still write like I'm a third grader who writes with their left foot. My handwriting is so, you would think that I finished 4th grade and that was it.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and take our first commercial break, Ted. And when we come back, I know there's a bunch of other stuff you want to start deep diving and getting into it. This is going to be a pretty heady episode, I think. We're getting a lot of good information out there. So stick around. Don't skip the commercials. If you do, check the show notes because the discount codes are down there. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, it's me again, back with some more awesome sponsors. I want to talk a little bit about Ray Allen Canine Manufacturing. Who else in our industry allows us to come to them with ideas as handlers, as dog professionals, and say, you know what, I think I would like to make this, or wouldn't this be a good idea? And they will actually sit down with you and talk to you about your designs. I've got a collab with them on a muzzle, on a leash and a collar. They're amazing to work with. Their products are top notch. They're made in America, in Colorado, and we love Matt. So give them a holler. Check them out on socials at Ray Allen, the letter K, the number 9, or visit them online at rayallen.com and use our discount code WDR10 RAY for 10% off. Guys, have you visited Dogtra lately? If you go to Dogtra, they have their new online portal, and it's really cool, very user-friendly. You don't have to call them and order them anymore. You can go to mydogtra.com, and they have everything there. You can set up an online profile. They keep your orders. They know what you've used. We use everything, their ball droppers and poppers. We use their e-collars, their 1900S hands-free for our officers, their Q and their 280 for our pet clients. We use all of their products all the time. Eric travels around and does seminars specific to Dogtra, so you can have him come in and teach a class on how to use it. Check them out, dogtra.com, and follow them on their socials. We love kinetic dog food. Ted has been using the large format. It makes excellent tracking treats. He uses it for teaching article indication. It's these huge nuggets of food that you can lay down, grab, put in your trainer's pouch. The quality is excellent. We love Debbie and Dave. We have a great relationship with them. They want to know you. They will talk to you about nutrition, about what your dog's needs are. They'll help get you set up. Their food is available everywhere. We've gotten it off of Chewy. You can buy it at stores. Please check them out. kineticdogfood.com. Your dog needs these nutrients, and they are really specific to our industry's needs. They have a full line of supplements now. Please check them out. We'll have some soon that we can give away. Go check them out. Follow them on their socials at Kinetic Dog Food. They'll really appreciate that.
All right, we are back. Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite with our buddy Chris from mydogtrainer.com.
How did you get that? We were talking about this before.
Before you came on, how did you get mydogtrainer.com?
How long have you had mydogtrainer.com?
I bought it. I had to hire a broker, honestly, because it wasn't being used, and but it wasn't available. So I hired a broker, and it took me about a month to get it. It was not fun to pay for, I'll tell you that. But
you don't have to tell us, but I have a feeling I know. But the whole idea for me was I wanted to, with what I've been doing, I've started to build a reputation across the country, and I wanted to focus on a name that was very simple, very easy, and was very smart in marketing, because it's like everybody's, if they're looking for a dog training, the name of the company is what people type in or search for. Yeah. That's why, all the canine companies have canine in them, or a lot of them do. And it's kind of, you kind of have to, there's not a lot you can do to stay away from it. And the ones that don't, with the exception of Von Lick and Shallow Creek, but everybody knows those guys. But if it's something canine, you're like, oh, okay. But
I bought that one too. My canine trainer.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
nice.
somebody led on to tell me, they're like, if you can find any of them that are close to yours, buy them up, because it's smart to do that, because people will, I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently people will buy URLs like associated with your company and then try to sell them to you.
Yeah,
So it's
or they'll
like,
buy them to prevent you from having them.
Yes.
And do nothing with them. Yeah.
Or in my case, I buy them and redirect them to my site.
Yo, there you go. That's smart.
So when somebody Googles or tries to type in like something else, it comes back to me. So all right, just go to the site. Yeah, no shame.
My Only Feet the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
Only Feet was
onlyfeet.com.
not for sale and very expensive if you wanted to buy it. So.
I can only imagine. So before the break, we were talking about like how you were introduced to an e-collar, and it was like 20 something years. It was a long time ago, and the thing is, what the story you told could have been last week. Because not a lot has changed, unfortunately. There are some really good, talented trainers like you.
Yes.
Like Eric, Tom Davis, who we've had on the show, like guys that are doing really good work with e-collars. So talk a little bit about, because before you kind of described like, you trusted this person and this is how we were going to go through this. You didn't know anything about e-collars, and you kind of like watch what's happening in front of you. You're like, hold on a second. So talk to me a little bit about how we started down the road of getting to modern day, like my dog trainer and modern Chris, and where you started to kind of realize that it was more than just used for hammering dogs.
Yeah, totally. So to me, it's always been like, I'm really, I'll just say it's easiest to say, I know everybody's weird in their own little way, but I'm weird about processing certain things. And so what I mean by that is when I watch things, I watch every bit of everything. So like to tell you, if I made a video of myself, before I've posted that video, I promise you I've watched my own video probably 20 times. And every single time I watch it, I'm watching specific details of specific things. So I believe
that because like if you're not watching this on YouTube right now, just if you're listening to us like in your patrol car or something, he's sitting in a giant room that's got more mirrors than a ballet studio. So I believe you. So
but yeah, so basically it's like I analyze everything. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching and watching and watching and watching and watching. So what I realized is I just started experimenting with certain things. And I realized that, when I first started, I did what people told me to do. So I would use the collar, similarly the way that people would use a leash to like correct a dog, to get a response or to come compliant with a command or, to make a dog do something. But it was only used for that. There was nothing that was really being used to tell the dog what you wanted or teach the dog in a way. It was more so, I'm going to show you how to avoid this, or I'm going to show you what happens if you don't respond to me. So in my mind, it's like a one-sided conversation. So the easiest way for me to explain this would be like if I gave you a cell phone. The cell phone could only ring if somebody didn't like what you were doing, or you could only call somebody if you were upset with somebody. And so when we look at that, I'm like, that device has now got half of the use of its capabilities. You can't call somebody to keep them in tune with you. You can't call somebody to tell them to do something. So that's where I was at with that. We got this device.
Now it's loaded too with all kinds of baggage and history and connotation that I only use this thing when I'm pissed, and I only use it, or it only gets used if somebody's mad at me or if I'm mad at somebody else. So like now it's got a whole like thing around it too.
Yeah. So I realized that at the end of the day, we're really just touching the dog. If you look at it, that's what's happening. You're providing a touch at a distance to a dog. And so then you think about it, it's like, I started looking at this and I'm like, okay, so it's no different than like your hands. There's people who pet their dog. There's people who push their dog's butt down, and there's people who will swath their dog. All right. Well, whatever you use your hands for the most is how your dog will interpret the sight or the sensation of your hand. It's not by you. It's basically whatever you're doing the most with your dog becomes what your dog starts to perceive from you. So I started paying attention, and I'm like, people only use this collar to enforce behavior that's already been taught, but hasn't been taught with a collar. Or they use it to teach the dog how to avoid situations where the collar would be. And again, we're going back to, if it's a good thing, why do we go into avoidance? If it's a good thing, why are we teaching the dog how to avoid it? And so I just realized that I could use this collar to touch the dog where the dog doesn't perceive it as good or bad. It's just a conversation between me and the dog. And that's where all this stuff, like you talked about, generalizing commands. that's what has helped me add the speed to the processing and the understanding of it, is being able to relay information physically to the dog that the dog does not think of good or bad in. It just thinks of me having a conversation with the dog, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. And watching the videos, like watching you do it, I can tell like there's a definite deep understanding of what's being asked. Right. And I've seen that a lot in PSA with some handlers, where I've seen handlers give the wrong command and the dog perform the correct behavior, which is cool because they've contextualized and generalized everything around them. They're like, this is what I should be doing. You're like, all right, cool. So there was one that stands out, and actually the one that like what prompted me to reach out to you. There was a video of you with a woman. She's probably in her late 40s, early 50s, with a shithead little young Malinois, right? That had and I don't know the whole history, like the PG history that was like, on social media was like, oh, this dog has a bite history, and he's a little asshole. He's less than 2, I think. But to watch that go down, so I'm just going to describe what happens in this real quick. So basically, this dog is just lighting everybody up. There's a muzzle on the dog, and Chris is basically just provoking, like he gets the leash from the woman and basically just kind of goes through and touches the dog. And I assume as this is going on, there's some e-collar stuff going on, but then towards the end of the video, and this woman could not control the dog. And I mean, it was the classic case of, I have this little asshole and he is walking all over me and whatever else. And there was something you did in the video that I was like, I've never seen that before. And you're like, literally invite the dog onto the place command, or onto the place. You didn't say place command, but what you're doing is you're asking her, you're like, invite him on. So from my perspective, like how we were taught to do that is to use the e-collar, right? You send the dog to place, they go on to place, pressure stops off the e-collar, right? So we basically push the dog on, and what you're describing is like this holistic thing of like body language, and there's like, you literally kneel down like at face level and you're like, come here. And he's like, all right, cool. And he hops up on there. I'm like, okay. I was like, there's obviously something else going on here that I don't understand. So I was like, I'm just going to text him and ask him what's going on. So kind of describe a little bit about what, like the whole touching thing, and carry that further and talk about that little dog.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because this conversation, this podcast will play over in my mind for like the next 6 months, over and over again, and I'll think about every conversation that we had about all the topics. So because of that, the reason why I'm saying that is because of this. All right, so I've been doing this for a long time, and I've put a lot of videos out, and I've had a lot of questions. And the thing is, I never say names, and how I knew that I was doing something that was a lot different was that there's a lot of big time people who will reach out to me and ask me questions about how I did that. So when people started reaching out to me, I was like, they really don't know what I'm doing. And so I will tell you this, the number one question that everybody asks me is how I'm using the collar. What nobody asked me is, what am I using with the collar to make things happen?
Well, that's what because the first question I asked you, I was like, when we had a conversation on the phone, the first thing I asked you, I said, what else? I said, what are you doing? But what else are you doing? Because
so you nailed it right there to a degree. Yeah. So, and that's what it goes back to. If I start getting too far off track, just tell me. All right.
No, you're good.
So I've realized that people tend to see things the way that people see things, and we try to process everything how we process it. And we don't really look into how the other party perceives things or reads things or interprets things or whatever it is. All right. So the one thing that I know is that from my experience and with the training is that dogs respond very well to touch, right? They also do very well with movement. All right. Well, movement becomes information. And so that's part of it. We rely on words. And even though people are teaching with the dog, I want the dog to understand what it is that I want them to do. But a lot of the touch that's involved in dog training that I see is very forceful. So we know this. If you pull on a dog, what's the general response that will happen? If you pull on a dog, they pull back. If you push on
reflex,
that's it. If you push on the dog, they start to push back. So we end up creating conflict even in the physical language. So now we're trying to use a physical language with the dog that they're physical, but we end up making it very confrontational because of push and pull. The one thing that a collar doesn't do is push or pull. So that's the benefit of it. The collar allows you to touch the dog, which will get a response. Okay, well, now how do I feed information to the dog because I'm not pushing or pulling in a direction that I want the dog to go? Well, you just said it yourself. Whenever I want the dog to go somewhere, the only way for that dog to understand where it is that I want him to go is I have to go where I want the dog to go. And people don't think that way. They want to force the dog to go to a specific area. They want to push the dog to go there into a sit. They don't actually create movement and invitation. So what you saw me do with that dog was limit mistakes. All right. So that's the other thing. So there's times in that video where you see that I actually shorten a line, right? When I go to that box, if I've got a 6-foot leash, I've got 12-foot radius of options. So what I call that is that's the tie out effect. So yes, I'm not letting the dog go wherever it wants to go, right? But I'm also not making the dog go to a specific obstacle. So what I mean by that is if I went to a box that's a 2.5 square foot, I'm going to shorten my line to be about 1.5 square foot. Okay, well now all that line's going to do is do what I call the tie out effect. A tie out does not pull a dog back in the yard. It just stops the dog from going anywhere else outside that boundary. And so once I limit that dog's ability to run away, I'm no longer allowing it to make mistakes. Now I need to put myself into a position where it shows the dog I need it to come. And it's a lot easier to get a dog to do something when you're creating a natural invitation through movement than it is for you trying to drag the dog onto a box, or you're trying to push the dog onto a box, or you're allowing some type of what people call uncomfortable, like they refer to as the pressure, like what you said, push the collar till the dog gets on the box. Even if the collar is not set high or uncomfortable, we're still conditioning the dog in that moment. The collar is not a good thing. If you feel the collar, that means that I need you to do something else. And that's a whole nother category of where I talk about cycling behaviors with stimulation, where you'll see, okay, this is one of the best things that I do. I'm going to jump gears, and I do this too. So I'm all over the place. So if you need to reel me back in, reel me back in. But every time I go places, people will tell me, they're like, "Hey, I see what you do. I know what you do. I train the same way." And I say, okay. I don't really say nothing about it until they keep doing that. And then what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I just got to get this out of the way. I'll ask the person to go get their dog. And some of the people who are watching this, I've probably done this to them. And they're probably going to start laughing as soon as they hear me saying this. All right, so I'll have them bring their dog over, and once they bring their dog over, I'll tell them, put your dog into a sit, and then they say, okay, put the dog in a sit, and then I'll tell them, I say, just start pressing the button on the collar. Well, I already know as soon as I tell them to start pressing the button on the collar, and they ask me why, I already know that we're not doing the same thing. All right. And what they'll see is I'm showing them a demonstration of how their dog processes a collar. And what I'm doing is I'm showing them that every time they press the button, what they've conditioned their dog to understand that the behavior they're in is not the behavior they want, because the dog will either shift behaviors, either shoot to a down if it's in a sit, or the dog will cycle into a heel or something like that. So that alone. And then I'll ask them to do it multiple times. And the reason why I ask them to do it multiple times is so it shows a clear demonstration of how their dog perceives their relationship between them and the collar. And then what I'll do is once that happens, they're like, okay, what's your point? I'll call any dog over, one of my dogs, and I'll tell them, I let them, just to make it very clear so they know I'm not trying to hoodoo them. I'm really trying to show them that there is a difference in the communication between what they're doing and what I'm doing. I'll put my dog into whatever position they tell me to put the dog in. So if I say place, sit, down, heel, doesn't matter what it is. And then once I put the dog in that position, I will demonstrate to them that it doesn't matter how many times I press a button, my dog does not change behavior or shift command. So my dog does not process the collar as I need you to change behavior. And so that there alone is an eye opener for a lot of people that I've demonstrated that to, because they're like, I don't understand why is that happening, or why is the dog not changing, or what's the point if the dog doesn't change? The point is that in those moments, it allows me to strengthen a behavior, speed a behavior up, or maintain a behavior where the dog would change, slow down, or check out. So that's what I mean. In certain areas, I have the ability to use a collar without interrupting the current behavior that I'm in to help the dog understand that I need them to stay to that task.
Yeah, we're a couple things. One, to the last point, I can see, and I've had it where we're working on, say, a downstay for a dog, right? And he goes to get up, because early on he goes to get up, and I know when the guy hits the stem, the dog's going to come off the cot instead of going back and staying and maintaining in the position that we want him. Because there'll be every once in a while be a dog I'm like, I know when this guy hits stem, the dog's going to move. He's being told what he's, that it's not doing the right thing, so they just bail out on it. The other thing you talked about, the back tie effect. Is that what you call it? Back tie effect?
Tie out effect.
Tie out effect is I do the same thing with tracking. And this is hard for people to understand when I'm trying to teach it to them. So when we have a dog during tracking that likes to cast and do the big out to the edge, to the edge, to the edge, I try to teach the guys to keep the dog in the meat. They're like, well, this is the way he tracks. I'm like, but you can teach him. And I'm not saying pull him in. If he goes far left, pull him back to the right. If he goes far right, pull him back. I'm not doing that. I'm just shortening his ability to go too far left or too far right. And it just starts to that little back tie effect where he just can't. And I'm not necessarily up his ass, like right up on his tail, but I definitely use that back tie effect to keep him from getting out. And then you just teach him shorter parameters. And I call it staying in the meat. He doesn't need to have a heart attack 400 times. Oh shit, I lost it. Oh, there it is. Then he goes to the left. Oh, I lost it. Oh, there it is. I don't need to, I just stay where the meatiest part of the track is. And I find it kind of, because there are some people that believe that casting type tracking is genetic on dogs. I don't know, maybe, especially in some shepherds, but you can definitely teach them other ways to do it.
100. Well, I mean, we do it with detection work. I mean, we teach them to get as close to a hooder as possible. So it's not like super difficult to
without having to drag them to it.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that Chris, you said that it like the two behaviors that Eric and I see a lot, especially for national certifications that we have a problem with the dudes always is some of the obedience. So it's more than one behavior, but then the downstay, like at a long distance. Yeah. Personally, like I don't teach dogs a stay command. Like I just don't. Right. And
for sure.
And when I explain it to people, I'm like, look, how do you reinforce a stay? Like I can't just keep saying it over and over again. And there's an internal timer going at some point for some of these dogs. Right. Yeah. So how do you reinforce and how do you punish a stay? And so, and the other side of that is when, especially for my canine handlers, under my dual purpose guys, when we do remote down, so the dog will be on a long line and they'll be out in front of us. If we're tracking, we come to a hard corner, we down the dog at a distance. So if they're 30 feet out in front of us and I down them at a corner so that one of the other guys can clear the corner for us. So we're not getting dragged into a fight or just allow us to pie the corner. Right. Like how do we conceptualize to the dog that when I say down, I want you down at 30 feet away from me. I don't want you coming back. And I have to remind my handlers, I'm like, look, for this dog's pretty much his entire life, the obedience command plots or whatever down has been rewarded at the handler. So the dog's like, all right, cool. Like I'll come back and I'll down next to you. So then it becomes this, like, how do you then maintain an obedience down at 30 feet versus down at my side? Right. So it becomes this like, and it's, we're dealing with competing motivators cross and forth. The other thing that you mentioned is the intensity. You didn't use that word, but that's what I took to mean. Yeah. And that's one behavior. That's one thing that we want, right? Like we want, especially for patrol dogs, like I need the dog to be the same intensity for as much as possible for a lot of the behavior, whether we're hunting for odor, whether we're tracking, and whether we're biting. And maintaining behavior integrity as well as maintaining intensity becomes kind of a double-edged sword. So what you're describing is very interesting in terms of being able to maintain intensity over time and duration. So like I tell people, distraction, distance, and duration are the three things that typically jack with us no matter what. But with the way that we're communicating with these e-collars, doesn't seem to be an issue, because watching you with some of these obedience routines and having decoyed for you and watched you that weekend, the dog was intense the entire time. Like, so it was clear
to keep a dog from falling out in that type of level that you guys are at. Like Ted's saying, that's always on, but not over, We've all worked those dogs now that we know that we don't like they're like you're talking about the dog who's cutting his nose and going everything.
Oh yeah, he just
spray drive,
bust blood vessels. I'd never seen it before. Like his nose would just no contact. He would just start screaming when he saw a decoy, and he'd just have blood coming down his nose. I'd never seen it before. But yeah, it's the intensity. But yeah, I'm not into that either.
The one thing that took me a while too to really understand was the power of, and I always say with dogs, movement is life. Like we were talking, you mentioned, for me, movement is life. Getting them off the X, moving a dog is the power of spatial pressure. Whether that's touching them or not touching them, but using spatial pressure and that type of communication.
I think I've mentioned that before too. I learned more about handling from little old ladies at the Tulsa Agility Club, like watching them handle. No, seriously, like because the dog can tell like where they want to go based on which direction their shoulders are turned. And, you know, they have these little cattle dog things or these little healer thingies that move at Mach 10. And these dogs can glance at their handler and see which direction the handler's, you know, they're not even really pointing, but you know, for the next obstacle, they want the dog, and that shit's timed, and it's the shortest distance is the fastest time. And watching them do, I asked them, I was like, how did you do that? And they're like, I don't know, we just do it. So I sat there and like you were describing, Chris, I sat there and watched them for a day or so, and I was like, I think I figured out how you guys do this. So obviously agility dogs are not like patrol dogs, but nonetheless, I'm like, so it becomes very, applicable to our side where we start talking about firearms, what we're doing with guns and what we're not doing with guns, and like how movement creates a lot of predicates for dogs that you don't normally think about. And I mentioned it to canine handlers. I'm like, what's the first thing that every cop worries about when they're arresting somebody? Is like where their hands are at. Right. So we're constantly watching their hands, and dogs are constantly watching what we're doing. So it's interesting that it's the holistic like view, which is kind of like what I wanted you to talk about. So obviously, well, I guess we can start that whole conversation by how do you introduce the e-collar to the dog? But we started talking about that with that video with that little shithead Malinois in the muzzle. But how do you introduce it to the dog? Like and then like we'll take a break after that, and then I want to talk about like how you use it in the training aspect, and then we'll kind of like roll on down the line there.
So the easiest way is it just depends on the scenario and what's happening. So it depends on what I'm trying to create. So this is it's so much easier to demonstrate this stuff. It really is, because it's like, you know, you already know this. If I say something, you know, I got two people here I'm talking with, each one of you are processing it in your own way. So it's the same thing with a dog and a collar. So it just depends. Like in this situation, I'll give you a breakdown of what I did with that Malinois. I knew that the Malinois had a problem, and he's basically a brat that had a bite history. I wouldn't even really necessarily call him like a super aggressive dog, but basically he just got to the point where they bred that dog, they raised that dog, they had the litter mates. They're actually competitors in PSA. They're very good people, and she's actually like, what was crazy is when I posted that video, everyone like started blaming them. You know, like they're like, that's their fault. I mean, you've seen that stuff before where people are like, that person shouldn't have that dog. But it's like everyone's like, oh, my dog would never. And it's like usually the people who say that are the ones who have dogs that do that same shit. You know what I mean? So, but my point was, what I like about this lady is that she's not the type of dog that just like, if the dog acts up, she's going to lay into the dog, because it's just like sometimes that becomes even more confrontational with those dogs. She doesn't get mad. She doesn't get worked up. That's the biggest thing whenever I'm dealing with dogs that want to fight, is not accepting the fight. All right. But you have to do the things that trigger the fight. So what I'm doing in this video is, I know this dog does not want to be touched. All right. So we would look at that and say, okay, the biggest problem with this dog is he cannot be touched by other people. All right, well, in order for me to fix the problem, we have to deal with the problem. It's just like I tell people, it's like if there's something that's going on in the family, we've got to sit down and talk about it. And if we talk about it, we know people are going to get upset, get mad, get worked up, because we're bringing up topics that people are having problems with. So I know once I touch this dog, he's going to try to bite me. But what I'm doing is I'm using this collar, and I'm using the movements that I'm doing to create a behavior in place of what the dog's doing. So instead of correcting a behavior or trying to eliminate a behavior, what I'm doing in that moment is I'm creating the behavior that I want in place of it. Does that make sense to you guys? So I'm doing multiple things at the same time. That's why the speed happens so fast, is because whenever I'm conditioning the dog, I'm not just trying to erase things I don't like. What I'm doing is I'm installing the things that I want in front of all the behaviors. So I'm creating brand new habits. So if me touching the dog's head causes him to bite, I'm just programming a sit. If me touching the dog's mouth causes him to try to bite me, I'm programming a heel. And so what I'm doing is I'm just turning the brain into something that says, when he touches me, this is what I do. When he goes this way, this is what he do. That's the whole process of it. But the way that I'm training the dog and teaching the dog is I'm teaching the dog that the collar is an extension of me. So it's no different than with your hands. It's no different with the leash. It's no different than anything else. I'm not even showing him how to shut the collar off. That's the big part about it. I never, ever, ever teach a dog how to turn a collar off. I don't want them to turn a collar off. And this is the primary part. Because I'm the collar, I do not want the dog to turn me off. And that's where I think I differ from a lot of people, is that people want to show the dog how to turn the collar off.
Yeah. That's I definitely do it that way. So now, the way you were describing that with touch the collar or touch the dog but teach the heel. I teach a thing called the power of twos, and I don't know if this is similar or not. The power of twos for me is where maybe I correct the first thing and reward the second thing. So it really works for the outing portion of the dogs that have conflict and out, where I do, they don't want to out, they want to fight and hold the out. But then we just create a down and reward the down is what gets them paid. So the letting go is just a means to get to the down. So I don't know if that's similar to what you're talking about. Do you correct the movement towards you, and then the heel is what pays? So then they stop the first thing and get to the heel? Is that?
It's basically like it can be used like that. So like let's say I've got an officer here. I've got one actually coming. That's it. You guys know this. There's a big thing where they have trouble getting their dogs to let go. Oh, yeah. They have all that stuff.
I travel around the country working on that.
Yeah, so I was gonna say.
So I'll give you an example of what I do with somebody like that. So we all know this too, and not necessarily with you, but there's a big thing that you hear all over. I've been told this a lot. I actually just got back from a thing that I did down in Kentucky or whatever. And what was funny is when I was there, everybody kept telling the officers that I was with not to work with me because I was putting too much control on their dogs and it was going to kill their dog's drive. And so that's the thing, is everybody says control. That's a big myth. In my mind, it's a big myth. Control kills drive. And so, I never know who, you know what I mean? I never know how people feel, but basically what happens is this: you got a guy who's been yelling Los or Fooey or Nine or whatever his out is for the past 6 months, choking his dog out, whatever it is. I don't think they understand that all they've done is recondition that whatever word they're telling the dog to out with has just been programmed along with fight harder. If you know what I'm saying. So in this case, what happens is we'll put really strong obedience on the dog. And we don't worry about bites. But this thing always comes up and people say, well, the biting's the problem though. I can walk them, I can sit them. And I'm like, just bear with me for a little bit. And so we go in there and we start reprogramming, we start reconditioning very tight sits, very tight downs, very tight heels, very tight recalls. And we do it so much that it almost becomes automatic, right? To where like you just say it and the dog's already starting to do it because you do it so much, the dog starts anticipating it. And so on day 1 or day 2, then when day 3 comes around, or even at the end of day 2, or sometimes day 1, we bring the guy out and we just start working obedience around the dog, right? And we just put the dog on the guy. And then all of a sudden I tell the officer, I say, listen, do not tell the dog to out. All I want you to do is tell the dog to sit. And almost 10 times out of 10, as soon as they tell the dog to sit, the dog just pops off the suit and sits down. That's what I mean. So I think that's what you're saying is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what you're saying is that you're reprogramming or conditioning or rewarding it down to get the dog to let go, to go to another position.
Correct. Yeah. So I found it really clears up a lot of, because by the time we get there, by the time I'm working on this, like you said, the los means fuck you, I'm fighting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But because why do I need to let go to get a regrip? I already have it. But when the sit or the down, so then letting go is just a means to get to lay down.
Yeah.
And that, because a lot of guys, and I did this for years, where we would tell the dog to sit after they outed, as just kind of a means of control or like certification thing. So I can walk up, I got to pat the guy down or call the dog back to me or whatever. And then I just started really paying attention and going, fuck, when he says out, the dog gets vocal. But when he says down, the dog is quiet.
Yeah,
let's start paying that down.
There's another version. There's another version of it, or another series of events that happens here, especially with like leashed. Oh, it doesn't matter if it's leashed or off leash, but building searches where we recall, like if they're engaging with somebody and I need them back, right? I don't there are 0 times where any of my officers will out a dog off of somebody and then want them to stay there. If I out them, I want them back. So I basically tell my handlers, I'm like, just give him one command, one behavior, just dog name here. He's got to spit him out to get back to you. It's pretty straightforward. It's not dog name out, dog name sit, dog name here. It's just dog name here. Right. And then when they come back there, for a little bit, I've stopped seeing it, thankfully. But for a little bit, there was a lot of guys. I saw a lot of canine handlers through HRD where they would recall dogs off of bites to tugs. The dogs would come out of the building or out of the room on fire looking for a tug. And I'm like, hey. And I've got some body cam of not our guys. I've got 2 body cams actually of a dog coming out of an actual deployment. They didn't. One, he bit somebody, and the second one, the suspect was inaccessible. But the dog got recalled, and he came out, and the handler wasn't the first one on the stack, but he came out and saw somebody standing there with a Glock in their hand, which is where a tug usually is, and both of these dogs smoked this Glock or this handgun in both situations. They're like, well, I've been recalled 1,000 times, and every time I come out of the building, I get a toy, so that's where it should be, and that's where it is. And so instead, I'm like, just call the dog out, get him into a heel position, walk 10 feet, and then reward him for fucking healing. And, it's like Eric said, the power of 2s or however many, you start chaining behaviors together so that it becomes an entire process rather than having to continually talk to him over and over and over again. Like, just one of my pet peeves is when canine handlers fucking talk to dogs like over and over and over again. They talk to them so much that they can't communicate with me. They can't communicate with backup. They can't communicate on the radio. They can't do anything because they're just standing there fucking talking to the dog. And I'm like, dude, which is where the stay thing comes in. Like, if I tell you to down until I tell you to do something else, and then we'll move on from there. But we're going to go ahead and take our last break. We come back, we'll pick up where we are in this conversation and then head down that road. So don't go anywhere. Listen to Alicia yell at you about discount codes. So we'll be back.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. Please check out our friends Jason and Aaron Perguson at Highland Police K9. If you guys are interested in going to school, if you've come out of the military, you can use your GI Bill to go through their school. They have a pet training school. They have a police training school. They have online courses that you guys can take, such as their K9 supervisor course. You guys can really take that as far as you want with them. They are a veritable fountain of knowledge when it comes to K9. They're located in North Carolina. They're always accessible, always available, and we've had such a long relationship with them. I cannot say enough good about them. So please check them out. If you go to Tactical Police K9 Training, go to their online programs, check them out, use the discount code NARC for 20% off any of their online courses. Guys, that will help you. It'll help you make headway in this industry. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times when we're talking about dog kennels and their construction, like you don't know where to start. What do I do? What do I add? I need to weatherproof this, waterproof this, pee-proof this. If you guys have checked out Horizon Structures lately, it's unbelievable. They literally have everything that you could possibly need. They can build your kennel with as many holes as you want in it, and they can drive it out to you, set it on your pad, hook it up, and you can move dogs in it immediately, from mild to wild, from one kennel all the way up, from the tiniest of pet runs to the hardest of working dogs. If you can dream it, they can build it. Go ahead and check them out at horizonstructures.com. Go specifically to their working dog area. It's commercial-dog-kennels. Give them a call, 888-447-4337. And of course, check them out on their socials at Horizon Structures, and they will hook you guys up. American aluminum has been such an asset to us. Our officers have their canine inserts. They have organizational lockers for the back of your patrol vehicle. They literally have just now put out an amazing heat system and alarm that integrates with their canine insert. Guys, they do it all. Give them a call. Check them out. It is high quality. It's made here in America. If you go to easyriderauto.com, online. Check them out or give them an email at quotes@AAA-mail.com or give them a phone call, 800-277-0869, and check them out. We also want to send a huge shout out. He recently passed away. Rest in peace, Brother Deeg. Thank you for our music. Thank you for the permission to use it. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you're doing well on the other side. Thank you guys for listening.
All right, we are back. Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite. We're here with our buddy from mydogtrainer.com, Chris Altherr. We've been talking about e-collar usage and proper e-collar usage, I guess. The one thing that I think is kind of interesting, Chris, is it's you're not like you're using. And while we were in the break, in the first break, I was kind of thinking about this. We get preoccupied a lot on tools, like I don't want you to use this tool, or I want to use this tool this way, and we treat e-collars like a magic bullet sometimes. And it's not like if you're listening to this and you've read Eric's book, I'm pretty sure, and I've heard Eric say this, that it's not a magic bullet. Like it's not going to miraculously over time fix and instantly. It's not going to fix a lot of things instantly. But what it does do is it clears up a lot of ambiguity if it's done correctly, which I think is what both of you talk about from different aspects. So, Eric, first I want you to talk about like how that relationship is kind of wonky from the onset, and then we can talk to Chris.
Well, so one of the things that I tell guys, and I talk about it in my book and I talk about it in my seminars, is at the beginning I said, listen, guys, we're going to use the e-collar to fix problems created by the e-collar, by poor e-collar work. And that sounds so foreign to guys. They're like scratching their head. They're like, oh man. And how much little talking they have to do and how they can communicate with. The one thing you said earlier that I really liked was if I'm trying to teach the dog to go to, like, say, go to place, I go to place. I walk up there with him. And when I'm trying to teach that to people, and I'm like, listen, just walk up there. He's going to walk with you. Walk up and invite him, get him up on place. And eventually I like to get his momentum going. And then maybe I slow down and, hey, kid, feel free. Get up there. Go on. And pretty quickly you can get a dog, people try to teach a dog to go to place from 10 feet, like the first rep, standing there, like they're standing there. I go to place. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like how they do it. So for me, clearing up the mental side of the handler or the trainer or whoever with the use of the e-collar, again, what they were taught. I was always taught, we're just going to use the e-collar for the out. Dog's not outing. Put it on in 127 on the dog trailer. He'll get out. And I was taught that way until it doesn't fucking work. And then I'm like, oh no, we should have been doing something else here all along. And then guys get in their head about it and they just don't understand the use of it. How do you, if you're going to go help somebody, how do you overcome the bad that's already been done using the e-collar to fix bad e-collar?
That's a good question, because that's okay. So you've seen our thing, and I refer to it. I call it E-Flo. So we call it. E-Flo stands for electronic fluid language that we've optimized. Okay, but the part that goes with our little tagline is what we call free your mind. And when I say free your mind, it has to do with exactly what you said. They've already been preconditioned to, this is what you're supposed to do. These are the steps you're supposed to take. You only use it here. And so that's the first thing we do, is we start to show them the problems. And I show them the problems by having them use the collar in areas where they've used it before and watching things fall apart. So once I can get them to see that what they're doing causes the dog to go into avoidance, change behavior, cycle behavior, now I've got the person aware that what they're doing is causing confusion. If I just told them that they were causing confusion, they wouldn't believe me. And it always comes off as a personal attack to people. So I have to get them to see with their own dog that what they're doing is causing confusion with their dog. Well, then I go through and I show them how to start creating clarification with the collar, like you said. So kind of what we're doing is the same lines, like you're telling people we've got problems with the collar, but we're going to use the collar to fix it. I've never worded it that way, and that's actually very brilliant for you to say that. But that's what I'm doing. I'm showing them that the actions, we already know this, actions speak louder than words, and talk is what? See, we know this. So for you to stand there and send your dog to a place board that you've never done before, or you've never done it in that scenario before, because people are also that way too. If the dog does really good here, they expect the dog to do good really here, and it just doesn't work that way. If your dog has not been conditioned to that environment or that area or that scenario, things are going to start falling apart. Your prior training is going to help you through it. But we know that as competitors, that as being a decoy, you see all these people who travel around and train all over the country and spend all this money and stay in hotels. And you got these people like myself, like in California, that was the worst trial I've ever done before in my life. It was so embarrassing. So I walk in on the field. And,
I will tell you that that scenario in the muzzle, where that one I decoyed in Texas couple months ago, and cats reused that scenario and had the exact same outcome with 2 more PSA 3 guys. Oh, so really? It wasn't just you. Like there was some context there that was lost, and I've recently seen you doing that, like the seated decoy, like seated unseated decoy with the muzzle, and I'm like, oh, Mr. Perfect is trying to figure out how he messed that one up. And so I was like,
see, Chris, you're not the only one who sucks. The guys in Texas suck too.
Yeah, so it's not just you if it makes you feel better, but our PSA judges are fantastic trainers as it is, and they understand how to not
make it suck.
Well, they understand how these dogs are trained, and they understand where the holes should be if there are any. So, but after watching you do it, I suspect that if you have to do that again, the outcome won't be the same.
Oh, so, it's done now. Yeah, for sure. I say that. Yeah. But
say that.
Yeah, but that's how everything goes. I mean, you can put training in all day, every day, but we all know that until you get out there and you start to perform, anything can happen, But that's really what it is just getting people to understand. And it goes back to what I said before. My biggest goal is to help people understand, to see things from the dog's perspective or from the handler's perspective, because you can't help somebody with the knowledge you have unless you know how to formulate it in a way that it makes sense to them. And that's what it comes down to. I think people look at the remote collar as you press the button and just shout a command. And if the dog's done it in one area, they're supposed to do it in every area. And it doesn't really work that way.
It's 2024, and we have smart refrigerators. So like we have smart toothbrushes. Not everything needs to be smart. Like I refuse to wear a smartwatch, but so I think that there's a misconception there, right? Especially like, I'm going to use something electronic that doesn't have a cord, that's remote, and we even call it a remote collar, and like I should push the button and it should work. And you're like, not really. And explaining that to people, especially canine handlers, right? I mean, where sometimes they're doing this under very high stressful situations, and it's like, look, you've got to be comfortable and fluid doing this. And I mean, it's not a plug and play thing. And I think that's the misnomer. While obviously, I mean, this show is sponsored by Doctra. While we are sponsored by an e-collar manufacturer, I definitely believe that there should be a little bit of education before you buy one of those things, rather than just buying it off Amazon, and not necessarily a dog, just an e-collar in general, and slapping it on a dog and plugging them in and being like, it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, I mean, it does, but you still gotta train the damn thing. And it's just literally, and that's what I started. Like when we started the segment out, I was like, there seems to be a preoccupation on tools, right? Whether like I used to own an equipment manufacturer. So believe me, I know like what manufacturer it was and whatever else. And like, I think Eric even says in his book, or he quoted me, like, leashes are such a good idea. There's cave paintings of them. Like we didn't invent the leash. And we definitely didn't invent dog training. So it's one of those things that there tends to be a preoccupation. And I see that in the firearms industry too. Like people are like, oh, my technique is terrible. I'll buy a more expensive gun that'll help. I'm like, no, it won't. I mean, Eric, you talk shooting for fucking ever. And I mean, so there tends to be a preoccupation on that, especially in law enforcement too. I think dudes are like equipment, like fixated a lot, which is, I mean, equipment in terms of like what people buy and use on their day-to-day jobs. So there tends to be some of that as well. And I even see that in the discussions, even in social media, like which decollar is best. And my response is like the one you know how to use.
Yeah.
Not the $85 one from.
Well, there's that. Yeah, those suck.
Pet dog trainers, we've all had those. You know,
Yeah.
I put a thing on him. One day I hit him on 2 and he didn't feel it. The next day he shit himself.
Yeah. But there is some consistency there. But I mean, the one you know how to use, like Garmin makes good ones, eCollar Tech makes good ones, Dogtra makes good ones, like the one that you know how to use and you're comfortable with. But yeah, I think there is a preoccupation with that rather than a preoccupation with the actual training portion of it, which that has to happen. So
the best episodes that we have, the most downloads, the most reaction we get are episodes where we talk about actually a training technique.
Well, that's how I was going to like clean this one up. Yeah. And
doing an actual training technique. And I have one for you. I'd like to hear how this works with you. So police dog handlers, trainers, pet dog handlers or owners, pet dog trainers.
Yeah.
Everybody, when they get a new dog, they find a lot of the times the hardest thing to do is to teach the down. And the dog ends up fighting. You know, you get a pitty that can hold out for 45 minutes in a sit and not let go. So recently, like this year, and I used to use.
I've seen a 3-legged dog that didn't want to down.
I've been using, try to lure a little bit of pressure, maybe some e-collar pressure, trying to do it. And those dogs aren't going to take the food. They're not going to do it. So I started doing more. I told my pet trainers, like, listen, and I do the same thing with police dogs. We're not fighting these dogs anymore. They don't even fucking know us. They got here yesterday. I'm not fighting them on the down anymore. We're going to do a little bit more self-discovery. But in your system, the way you're doing things, how do you combat that?
So like it's like, okay, so you have to prioritize everything. So things do go in stages. Like I just put out a video probably a half an hour before we got on this podcast, and I've got my 6-month-old puppy. I've got him in a down, and that's what I've put him in. And then I'm tossing a ball to him and having him catch and hold the ball while he's staying in a down, taking it, tossing it. I do those in sits and downs. But it's like, in order for that to even happen, I would have to be able to have him catch an object first and stay stationary, you know? So like, the reason why I'm saying that is because there's certain things that have to take place before we get somewhere else. We've even talked about that with the bite work that I do. I don't know if you guys have seen where I teach the puppies how to do bite work off of a retrieve. Have you seen?
Yeah, I saw that.
So I'll give a rundown of that. So basically what happens is I have the dog pick up an object and bring it to me. Well, I've noticed, and I learned this just from watching decoys. I'm not a decoy. You've decoyed. People think I'm a decoy because they see me catch my dogs. I'm not a decoy. Basically what happens is I teach the dog to pick up an item and bring it to me. And where I start having them bring it to me is bring it to my hand. But I don't have them just bring it to my hand. I have them push the object into my hand. So what I start teaching is the dog to grab an object, drive it into my hand. And then what happens is after that, I eliminate thrashing. I create full grips. And then because I'm having the dog pick up specific items, now I have the dog targeting what item I want. Well, once I transfer that to a suit, whether it's bicep, forearm, leg, whatever it is, now I've taught the dog. So again, this goes into this. To get back to the down, I have the ability to lure without food or toys. I teach the dog to follow specific parts of my body. So where you guys see the dog heeling next to me with a heads up heel, that's usually taught within a day. I used my hand as a target. So I teach the dog how to come and touch a specific part of my body. Well, now once I have the dog touching a specific part of my body, I can move the dog anywhere I want to in any position I want to, whether I want to put him into a sit or put him into a down. And it's all done just by getting the dog to follow a specific part of my body. So by the time I get the dog moving in any direction, forwards, backwards, beside me, front, I teach downs in front of me, moving backwards, moving them into the ground. So basically I'm using reversing behavior to teach a downwards back.
Oh, so they scissor down instead of do the whole, like the other creepy down.
I never teach a sit. I never teach a down out of a sit. I always teach a down out of a stand moving backwards.
Them moving backwards or you moving backwards?
They're moving backwards.
They're moving backwards.
Yes. Yep. And you'll notice that in the video, you'll see that every time he downs, even without boards, he drops backwards. So we're just moving around and he drops backwards. Yeah.
Which is good for, because I mean, in PSA, you'll get, or in all bite sports that have those position changes, you get dinged for dogs creeping. And that creep comes from anticipation of being recalled or anticipation of being rewarded, because they almost universally will creep towards the handler or towards the decoy. And you know, when they want them to down, they want their little front feet to stay. You can't see what I'm doing with my hands on, but they want
Judah video. Sorry. Is that the Judah video on your Instagram?
Just put it up. It has pink and blue. Yep. That one's it right there. Yep.
6-month-old dog.
Yeah, he turned 6 months on the 7th. So whatever today is,
He does. He backs up.
Yeah. I watched it earlier. I saw. Well, it's not that video, but I haven't seen it yet because I've seen some of the other ones from Judah. But
you do that with everybody, like pet dogs, everybody.
Yeah, and
if they're stubborn, if they're not going to lay down.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a lot of the thing that's crazy about this is everyone always talks about, you know, what do you do to reward them? You know, and it's like, that's the hard part. Is the reason why I love this system is because I don't have to have a dog that has, like, Judah is probably the softest dog I've ever had before. Like, what's funny is his breeders even gotten phone calls about how I've ruined him because with an e-collar, because he doesn't go after a toy 1,000 miles an hour, and every Malinois is supposed to go after a toy 1,000 miles an hour. He's just complete opposite, night and day, different than my wife's dog. My wife has a littermate to him. He's the Dutch looking puppy. So basically they're litter mates. His brother's a crazy psycho, and he's just la-di-da lover. Like this dog that you see in the video, he's the type of dog that would rather just be on the couch hanging out with a person. Like, that's who he is. He'll play and do stuff. But it's neat because sometimes people don't believe that because they see the behaviors I'm developing, and they're like, well, in order for that to happen, there has to be some type of payment system going from there. But basically what I tell people in that moment is I say, hey, go back and watch the video so you can see that I'm not lying to you. And I want you to see where I'm marking or rewarding behavior. And they'll go like, well, you threw the ball there and let him go for it. So that had to have been the behavior, or that had to have been the reward. And then I'll say, okay, so when I had him pick it up, did he get to do what he wanted to with it? Or did I make him hold it still and carry it next to me? And, you know, and they're like, well, you made him do stuff with it. I'm like, okay, so then was he able to do what he wanted to with it? Or was it another task? And they'll stop and they'll think, and they're like, well, I guess it was another task then. So that's the hard part for people, is that there's not really a food system or payment system. If you go down, then I throw the ball for you. Or if you touch my hand, then I'll give you food. Because that's what's crazy. You know, what's crazy about that is people have actually accused me of soaking my hand in meat to get the dog to follow my hand, because they're like, you've got to be doing something to your hand. Yeah. Like, I'm looking at
I teach fucking patrol dogs how to do that. And I do it just because, like, when we call dogs out of buildings, and I'm like, just hold your fucking hand up like this. You can't see me, but just at your hip, like with your palm facing the ground. And every single one of them will come in and boop their snoot on the handler's nose and then go into a down. I'm like, yeah. And I taught my personal dogs to do that. I'm like, touch, and they come up and put their nose on teach the muzzle the same way. I'm like, put your head in here. And then I mark that. I'm like, it's not rocket science. I mean, they sell that. What's that thing, Eric? The trick and treat deal? That was a little ball and the dog goes over and touches his nose. And then
I've seen those. Yeah.
Same thing. Like, I
just want to teach a dog to push buttons. Those fuck you. You know, the dogs are food now, bitch. But actually, if you see in the video, the one time you drop the ball, he picks it up, then he downs. He already has the reward.
Yeah.
And then he still does the down. I'm gonna have to mess around with that reverse down, because, you know, we got reps to do, right? We got a dog coming in for a board and train. He's only going to be here for so long. We got to get reps, and the trainers were doing it. And so my thing lately has been, listen, I'll put the dog in a sit until he can't lay down, until he can't sit anymore, and then pay him for self-discovery. But sometimes I got shit to do. Like, this is taking too long. You know what I mean? I'm super impatient, but I don't want to fight.
Always in a fucking hurry.
I don't want to fight them. You know, we don't want to fight these dogs anymore. They've come from a place where they have no leadership, and they've been pushing back against people. You know, or bullying or bratty behavior, or just like too much from the people. And so here I am trying to get this dog to lay down. And they're like, who the fuck are you? You lay down.
You lay down, bro.
And they won't take the food. You know, you're trying to do the food if that's your way. So you always use your hand for that, or you try to
it's always. So like I put out a video where I was talking about, I think I just put out the first video where I was talking about our school, and you'll see me, I've got one of my Malinois, his name's Yada. And what you're seeing me do is just weave him through my legs, wrapping around behind me all the way in front of me. Everything I've even created, I have him do this where he's in heel position and I have him stand up and heel around and spin in circles with me. But that's all that is. Everything was taught out of that. So his heel was taught out of that. Like you said, muzzle work was taught out of that. So it's kind of like, if you want me to go somewhere, you have to specify where you want me to go. Right. So it's like, but this is the other thing. This is another reason why I never really got into luring with food, is because I noticed that every time I lured with food, the dog's investment was always on the food. Right. So it's like, even though I'm trying to like relay information to him, his primary focus is the food. So it's like, what I realized is that every time I'd bring food out, I would have a problem with food, with the dog being fixated on the food, which took away from me being able to have the dog do what I wanted it to do. So I just started having the dog follow parts of my body, whether it's left hand or right hand. And then I just played around with it. And where I have him standing up on his back feet and spinning around in heel position or coming forward, him coming up was him trying to touch his head to the top of my hand. Same thing for his bags. I have them go into a sit, and then my dogs will find my hand. So when I put my hand above their head, like as I raise it up higher, the dog starts to follow the hand up. So then I can move the hand in a direction to get them to sit up or beg pretty or whatever people call it. I'm sitting here waving my hands around like you guys can see me too. I know you're doing it.
I'm doing the same thing. But, earlier I was like, oh.
But it's just, that's why I say everything's through invitation. So it's like teaching the dog to come and find the target, and then the target moves and then he goes here. So I can get the dog to go. And that's even transferable to a decoy. That's transferable to scent detection. It's transferable to all that. And that's one of the things that I see, is that the people who do use collars, it goes back to this, because they generally teach the dog to either stop or return to them, they have a really hard time using the collar to create focus on a decoy or even my marks. Like I got really big into having full facing marks where I'll do a lot of these, like where the dogs are returning to me in a heel, like I'll recall the dog. And then while he's coming to me, I'll have him drop an item. And then on the return, I'll have him do a 180-degree turn and plan a sit and just mark the object. So instead of just having the dog face his head, but that's what I mean is, because I do that, I have the ability to not just use a collar to have the dog focus on me or come to me or return to me. I can turn that around, and then I can still use the collar to put primary focus on a decoy, an object, even move the dog closer to an object. So that's why I say this system works in every avenue possible.
Do you have any like online instructionals? People pay for stuff?
We're working on it, but this is the thing. This is what it happens. So it's like, people have been asking me for this stuff for a long time, or when I put these videos out, like I said, I don't throw names out there because, I'm flattered that they do it. Also, you said something about social media. I just now started tagging my own videos. I don't know if you guys noticed, I'll put like at Chris Altherr on there, because I've had so many accounts. People I don't know how they're doing it. They're taking my videos, they're creating fake accounts. And people are sending them to me, and they're doing like it. What made me mad was somebody sent me an account somebody was using that was duplicating all my videos, and they had 20,000 more followers than what I did. I'm like, how are they doing better with my own stuff than what I'm doing? But that's
went to go check the mailbox for a check.
Yeah, I wish. But basically, yeah. So it's like, I'm trying to figure out how I release all this without giving everything away. And that's the hard part, is like, I'll have people call me. Like I've done a couple FaceTimes with some trainers where they see the content and they're like, what are you doing? And they're like, can you FaceTime? I'm like, no problem. Just call me. And I get my dog out. I walk them through everything. And then you'll see them putting videos out like that. Well, then you'll see people contacting them for that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with it. But I'm mapping this out. I've been building an online course that takes you through step by step. And the plus part about this is, what I love is, it's not with pre-trained dogs. So the videos I've been making and the content I've been making are with full dogs that have not been touched. And that's important to me, because I think that from what I've seen, a lot of the people who are putting content out online are usually always using a dog that's already been pre-trained to a certain degree. I don't think that's everybody, but you see that a lot. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's missed in there, but I'm trying to figure out a way that I can keep my content safe without people taking that content, recording it, using it, and then selling my own stuff to everybody else too.
The one thing that I can tell you about that is that, especially with what you're doing, there is like, I can tell people how I do whatever I'm doing, and I can walk them through it, but there's still no replacement for like physically getting in front of somebody and doing it and going hands on. That's why every time we do a decoy episode, or every time I'm asked to do like speak at a conference or something, and they're like, oh, can you talk about decoy stuff? I'm like, yeah, but I mean, it's not really the venue for it. And because there's so like, there is no podcast, there's no book, there's no YouTube channel, there is no website that you can go to that will make you a good decoy. There is just not.
I agree.
And like, that's why I'm like, you can give people whatever you want and they're going to do whatever they're going to fucking do with it. And that there's no replacement for standing in front of somebody doing it. And that's where I learned the most. Even, you know, and I went the exact opposite way that you did. Like I have a shit ton of education and I learned more from actually working rather than sitting and listening to some goofball talk to me all day, but like actually putting my hands on stuff and doing something. And that's where the real value is because, you and I had a conversation. I asked him like, do you have a tone box? And you're like, yeah, but I don't like using them because that's not really what this is about. And you explained it to me and I'm like, oh, you're right. It's not. Okay. So I could kind of see what's going on. I wouldn't worry about that as much. Because like I said, like Eric, I mean, wrote a fucking book. Like he has a fucking book you can buy on Amazon. Awesome. And even then, like Eric, you've had people tell you like, hey, I read your book after going to your seminar and they're like, oh, and it helped. It cleared up a lot of things, or it reminded me of something I missed, or it showed me something that I missed completely. And or it filled in a lot of the gaps. So
I've had people say, I don't need to come to your conference. I bought your $15 book.
Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It cost me $350 for you to not come, but that's all right. No problem.
I know. And then it's like, oh, the system sucks. So I don't get the same results. And I'm like, well, have you have you been to one of Eric's seminars? So, So speaking of all, like we keep talking about these videos and stuff, you can see them on, it's mydogtrainer.com.
It's got a link to our YouTube. Our YouTube's brand new. So as a thing, the YouTube's brand new. Instagram, I never got into that stuff. I just started getting into it. I saw you just joined TikTok. I thought that was awesome. That's fairly new,
it's
right?
not me. It's one of my trainers. It's one of my staff members. I refuse to do TikTok. It's one of my trainers is doing it for us. I think it's Lisa or Bailey. I don't remember. One of my trainers is running it for me, or maybe Alicia. I don't fucking know.
I have a TikTok, but I don't use it.
Yeah, well,
I'm supposed to. I mean,
it does well.
People are on me about it. Yeah.
TikTok does for me. It does very well.
Teaching the Chinese how to train dogs.
Yeah, Facebook and
you're giving away all your stuff to the Chinese.
What are you doing? Communist Party.
They're over there moving dogs around with their hands. See.
Soaking their hands in meat.
it's so exactly so we can find you at mydogtrainer.com and we're on Instagram and Facebook. Well, it's all that shit's on there, but
so most of it's my name. So Instagram is Chris Altherr. My Facebook is Chris Altherr. My TikTok.
Spell that for people that are not on YouTube.
Yeah, it's CHRIS. Last name is ALTHERR. And then, two R's. And then TikTok has a period between Chris and Altherr because I don't know why. It just happened that way.
So what you should do is go watch these videos and then reach out to Chris.
Yeah.
and then be like, okay, I saw you and I heard what you were saying. So
yeah,
I just followed your TikTok, so I'll have to get on there.
Thank you.
And your
Instagram.
You're doing a deal where you've got the hold on, I'm on the wrong side. You're doing a course where you can now come. It's a 3-part course, I think, right? Yeah,
right now, but we're getting ready to add more. So we got a 3-part course right now that takes you through the entire system. So we start with basically just introducing you to like what we would call important behaviors, sit down, come, recall, stuff like that. Just getting you fluent and being able to create behaviors. And then the second part, we get into more advanced behaviors, marking, send outs, directionals, casting, retrieves. And then when we get into the third, we're prepping you to be able to take any dog, like where I took that Malinois, like comfortably be able to take any dog and just demo in front of people and feel fluent in doing it. So
you and I talked about that on the phone where I was like, I don't understand why people have like dedicated like demo dogs. I'm like, I'm not interested in what you can do in
your dog,
in unlimited amount of time with a single dog. Like, here's 20 minutes. Show me what you can do in 20 minutes with this asshole that we picked up from the pound. And they're like, okay, that's what I want to see. When I'm hiring trainers anyway. So I like that you mentioned that. And when you mentioned that's what I thought in my back of my head. I was like, I need to make sure I say that because you're like the little asshole Malinois that I keep talking about.
Totally.
Like, that dog was a dick. Like, I could tell, and I could tell he had that lady's number too. So, and I was like, and then watching you do it, I was like, okay, something's going on here. So But yeah.
So people come here and listen to this, and then if they go watch your videos, they might be confused.
Yeah.
They want to learn it. Where's the best place for them to reach out to you at?
Website would be the best. We've got contact forms all over the place. I do traveling seminars too. So basically there's stuff you got to do. We have certain requirements that we ask for, certain attendance, certain amount of days, stuff like that. So right now we're just focused on the school. And the best part about that school is like you said, people bring their own dogs. We want them to bring their own dogs, but we actually have dogs here on site. So this isn't where we get together and just talk about things. Like course one is we're getting out, we're working dogs, you're doing stuff, there's testing on it. Because I'm a big believer in that. It does drive me nuts. I will say it's one of that. You got to start somewhere. But you got people who've got these certifications just from sitting in a chair watching videos online. They've never put their hands on a dog, but they're out here, and you got to start somewhere. But it's like, I want to be one of those people that gives people the opportunity to put their hands on dogs to get them worked before they go out and start exchanging money to work client dogs or work with departments or work with whoever. They've got to, you've got to have a feel for it to a degree versus just listening.
Yeah, I think Brown Mackie College does a correspondence course on dog training, and you never touch a dog.
Well, what's the one that Armin went to?
I don't know, something up in Canada.
Armin went to some bullshit one that he didn't even really fucking finish. Anyway, that's 2 for 2.
So where you at, Ted?
Ted_Summers on Instagram. And then you can look me up on Facebook. It's just dog stuff and memes anyway. And then Torchlight K9, letter K number 9, and then working_dog_radio for the podcast. I guess we need to make some new art now. For the next 4 years, I guess, for the podcast. We sold some of those shirts, and we sold some tights too. Yeah. The Make America Bite Again thing. Yeah. So, yeah.
You can make a Malinois look like Donald Trump. It's easy. It's not hard. It's not hard at all.
We'll just put a toupee on him.
So that and the out this, we have one that says out this.
Yeah.
The dog doesn't out. It's pretty good.
Your dog doesn't out is fake news. So who knew?
Chris, it was great having you on, man.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much.
Had met you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will be a good episode. I think there'll be a lot of questions on this one. And Chris, you'll probably have
question too.
Yeah, Chris, you'll probably have a lot of people reach out to you. You may have Kyle Schaefer from. We haven't had him on the show, but we've done. Eric and I both have done seminars with them. They're close to you. And shit, Kyle, if he hears this, Kyle, you may want to reach out to Chris and have him come talk to you guys. He's close. So. Kyle's a good dude.
They always host 2 or 3 big training seminars a year.
Nice.
I think a fall, a spring, and maybe another one if they get one. And they raise money to pay for training for
they have a whole 501 that pay.
Great. And I've done 3. We've done what between HRD and my stuff, like 4 of them over there.
And I think I've done 2 or 3.
That's Central Indiana, that whole area over there, right where you're at.
I feel like an asshole because the lady that runs it is super nice. Is her name Teresa?
I don't know, but I cuss too much when I'm around them. I always feel bad.
Yeah, I do too. But
I'm like, sorry. She's like, I've prepared myself.
They won't die. She's super nice though, man. Super nice lady. I can't remember her name. I feel like a dick. I'll remember it as soon as we stop recording. Anyway, Chris, man, this has been good. I thought it was going to be good. And after that conversation you and I had, I was like, oh yeah, we need to do this one. And it felt it fell right into what we had already planned going on for this series of episodes. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this is my first podcast ever, so I appreciate that.
Nice. Hopefully there'll be more.
Yeah.
We know all the other podcasters in this genre. Yeah. And if they ask me, hey, who should we have in? I'll send them your way.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You probably get a call from some other guys for sure, which is cool. So, but everybody listening, go hit Chris up. Go check out mydogtrainer.com. So with that, thank you, gents. We'll talk to you guys later.